And you know what? Fascist is just the new racist. It's just a trend. Fascist is the racist of 2025. So if you haven't yet been called a fascist, you're just not cool. You're stuck in 2024 if you're still being called racist and no one's called you a fascist yet. Yeah. That's the state of the world today. You know, I swear with every day that passes, our leftist leaders here in the UK seem to be getting more and more unhinged with the crazy nonsense they're spouting. Like totally bonkers, the kind of stuff they're saying. And I'm not even in this game of left-right team sports. You know, I don't have a stake in this. I don't subscribe to either party. I just think we all need to hold our leaders to account, whether they're on the left or the right. But it's getting harder and harder to support leftists these days because the stuff that they're spouting is just so crazy and they're just becoming so intolerant. So what I'm talking about here is yesterday I was scrolling through my newsfeed and I saw a video of the ex-Scottish First Minister. And for those of you who are not in the UK, the First Minister of Scotland is kind of like the equivalent of our Prime Minister here in England. And his name is Humza Yousaf. And do you know what he said? He said, and he was speaking proudly as if they'd achieved some great victory. He said the far right is collapsing. And you know what his example was? He said because Elon Musk has announced that he's going to be stepping down in a month from his current role in the US government. So that to him means the far right is collapsing. It's wrong on so many levels. First of all, how is Elon Musk far right? He has been pretty much a lifelong leftist, and like many of us, he felt he could no longer support the current left, which I call the neo-left, since they've been getting more and more intolerant, as I just said. But yeah, he's always been a liberal progressive type, but he's only recently joined the right, like millions of other people in America who voted for the Trump administration. So to call him far right is just nuts. And the other thing though that I wanted to highlight is that it's fake news. This idea that Elon Musk has backed down, like he's basically suggesting that because of the actions of his haters, you know, the people who've been vandalizing Teslas, he's basically saying that we're victorious, we've won. You guys, with your criminal activities, have forced him to back down. So he's basically condoning and praising these extremists for what they've done, setting fire and exploding cars that belong to ordinary people who you don't know anything about the people who own these cars. And you know, as a result of these actions, I think Tesla's share value has plummeted. Like, I think they've lost like 36 million or something like that. Was it 36 billion, I think? But the thing about it is, that's not why he's stepping down. It wasn't some victory of the left that they've achieved through their vandalism. It's because he was on a short-term contract. Doge isn't a permanent thing. It's a project. His contract was legally not allowed to go beyond 130 days. And it's a project that has he's done what he was assigned to do. Saved the US government $150 billion. So the fact that he's stepping down from his role doesn't mean that Musk is surrendering. It's the fact that his contract, which wasn't a permanent contract but a short-term contract, will be coming to an end. Anybody who's worked in a major corporation will be familiar with corporate restructuring. It's something that I've experienced multiple times in various jobs that I've had over the years. And what usually happens, you bring in a consultant for a period of, say, 6 months. You pay them a fortune, like Elon Musk has been paid. And yes, I admit, he has been paid a fortune. And they always do get paid a fortune, these change management consultants. And I remember whenever we had these people working in our organization, it peeved everybody, right? Because their job was to stir the pot, shake it all up, and put a lot of people out. Yeah, these change management consultants always come in for a fixed term, and they look at all the ways in which they can make savings for the organization, and it involves moving around a lot of staff and getting rid of a lot of staff. And I remember in one organization I worked for, we had this little, like a box thing, a grid where people were put into different categories according to what type of an employee they were in the context of this restructuring. And I was a change champion. Yeah. We had, I can't remember the other categories. You had nodding dogs, and they were just useless. They just nodded and agreed with everything, but didn't really care at the end of the day because they just weren't all that into their job. And then you had the ones that disagreed with everything, the troublemakers. And the change champions, which were the smallest group, were the ones that would get on board, and we would approach the change with positivity, and we would kind of like bring the naysayers along with us. We would convince them that this was the right thing. And so I was a change champion. And so I would be working with the organization to ensure a smooth transition and to try and boost the morale of all the disgruntled staff who didn't like the changes that they were seeing. So yeah, those were my corporate days of the past. And so I understand the way these things work, having been through them more than once. And so that's basically what Elon Musk's role has been, leading one of these short-term restructuring projects for the entire government, making savings wherever they could. And I would say a lot of Americans actually agree with a lot of the cuts that were made. You know, like spending God knows how many millions transing Guatemalan children. You know, stuff like that. Crazy stuff that we didn't even know that we were paying for. I mean, not we. I'm not even American, but American taxpayers. You know, they've had no transparency in where their hard-earned tax dollars have been spent. And sure, that is the nature of government. There is no transparency, no accountability. But I would argue that a large proportion of the American conservative voting public, much of which constituted people who had always voted Democrat for much of their life, but felt that they'd been kicked out of the left because they too couldn't tolerate what they were seeing. Much of that public was in full support of what Doge has been achieving. Because when your economy is collapsing and there's homelessness everywhere, yet money is being sent all over the world, voters got fed up, and Doge seemed to be finally putting America first, as they had voted for. And yet somehow, this has been framed by some of our politicians as a far-right thing. That the desire to have some transparency in where your tax money is going, and the desire to not be sending all our money abroad for foreign causes that we don't really care about. That's considered far-right. The ironic thing is, though, when you look at what's going on here in the UK, we've got a Labour government that's, I mean, it's not really what I would call leftist, but they consider themselves leftist. But if you look at their actions, you look at their rhetoric, I don't really think there's much about it that could be considered leftist in terms of like what would have been old school leftist. It's this new left that is actually totally unconcerned with the common man and the working class, and serves the metropolitan elite. But whatever you call them, our so-called leftist government is doing the same thing.
How is that?
If you look at the cuts that our dear leader, Hale Starmer, is making right now, it's really not all that different from what's happening in America with Doge. So why don't they call that far right? British people are up in arms, just like the Americans, about all of the proposed cuts to the benefit system, for example. And our dear leader is talking about tightening up the borders, deporting illegal criminals. What's the difference between what he's talking about and what Trump is doing? Because you know what, at the end of the day, it's not a left-right thing. It's not a right-wing thing to want to make cuts. It's a recession thing. Or you could say it's a depression thing. You could go further than recession and say we're in a depression. They just haven't named it. They haven't labeled it as such. Instead, people are finding that they cannot make ends meet. They cannot afford to live the way they used to live. The cost of living has gone up so much with our insane inflation that we're basically in a depression, but they just haven't labeled it that. So when you're in this situation, you're going to make cuts. And that's what every government is doing. It's not a left-right thing. So all the people who attack Musk and Doge and Trump and call them fascist and Nazi, all these silly words, they need to look at what it is that they're, what are the actions that they're referring to that make these people fascists, and how is that different from the actions that our leftist government is taking here in the UK and other leftist governments around the world. The whole left-right thing is bullshit. It's nonsense, just designed to keep you fighting each other rather than holding your leaders to account. Because in this game of left-right team sports, at any given time, whoever's in office has the blind support of half the country. And that's what it's all about. If not for this false divide they've created, this arbitrary line between left and right, we would realize that most of us want the same thing. Most of us care about what our tax money is being spent on. Most of us want our streets to be safe. Most of us don't want our governments to be corrupt. But most of us are too busy fighting each other. So while Humza Yousaf and his dumbass disciples are cheering the collapse of the far right, and they think they've achieved some kind of victory, you've got to ask yourself, what is this far right they're talking about? It's a term that's being thrown around so loosely these days, and increasingly it refers to the average citizen, the average working class voter in the UK and in the US and in Canada and Australia and so many of our liberal progressive nations is being branded as far right by their own leaders that they voted in. So we got to resist this name calling and bullying by not only our peers and strangers on social media, but our own leaders, our own political leaders, calling us stupid, meaningless names like far right that really just, they have so little value now. When you're applying it to the arguably the majority of society, it just doesn't mean anything anymore. And the word fascist, like I've lost count of the number of times I've been called fascist on social media lately. And you know what? Fascist is just the new racist. It's just a trend. Fascist is the racist of 2025. So if you haven't yet been called a fascist, you're just not cool. You're stuck in 2024 if you're still being called racist and no one's called you a fascist yet. Yeah. That's the state of the world today. I think we should actually just go back to calling each other retards. I think that will have more weight than fascist now. I mean, the average person who uses that term fascist doesn't even know what it means. Next time someone calls you a fascist, ask them, what do you mean by that? How do you define fascist? And I guarantee you, 9 out of 10 won't know how to define it. They think it means, the modern definition of fascist means somebody who disagrees with a leftist. Basically, it doesn't even just mean conservative. It means anyone who's not a leftist. So that it also includes centrists, free thinker, independent free thinkers who don't take sides in this stupid game of political team sports. We're all fascists now. So yeah, I think we should just go back to calling each other retards. Or at least, we should call each other libtards and magtards, right? At least that says a bit more, it's got a bit more meaning than fascist or Nazi. But yeah, you can't call anyone racist anymore though. That is totally 2024, so passé. Or a transphobe, that's totally passé now too. I think we need to create some sort of like a reclamation movement. You know, like how black people reclaimed the N-word and it was in all the rap songs throughout the 90s and noughties? We should have a fascist reclamation movement and reclaim the word fascist. Wear it with pride. What do you think? Have you been called a fascist yet? If you haven't, you're just not saying anything. If you haven't been called one yet, it just means you're a wuss. No, it also means that you're just not taking part in this stupid game, right? So kudos to you, because you don't have to take part. I take part in it because this is what I do as a content creator. And, I speak my mind, I speak my truthful mind, and because I do, I get a lot of hate for it from the intolerant neo-left. So, yeah, it just comes with the territory of being the type of creator that I am, that speaks truth to power. So, do leave me your thoughts. If you agree or disagree with anything I've said here, please leave me a comment and give this video a like. And if you're not already doing so, please subscribe to my channel. And if you enjoyed this video, do give this one a watch too. Thank you so much.